To an anthropologist, a fictional world is more than just a setting. It is a deliberate expression of culture filled with both intentional design and accidental artifacts. Hi, I'm Mal. As an archaeologist and an anthropologist, I love analyzing the things people have made. In this series, I'm applying that lens to the world of Azeroth. We aren't looking at the lore found in novels or elsewhere, we're looking at the game world as a construct, perhaps as a reflection of our own societies. We're also not necessarily doing a lore deep dive. Instead, I want to deconstruct the little things, the choices made by level designers, writers, artists, and others to see what they reveal about these constructed societies, intentional or not. We will be relying fairly strictly on in-game evidence, from buildings to NPC dialogue and environmental storytelling, rather than using more curated external materials. These external sources often do greatly expand on the lore and its context, but we want to focus on the society we see constructed inside the game world. Today, we're going to be looking at Eversong Woods in Quel'Thalas. This area is on the cusp of transformation with the upcoming Midnight expansion, so this will be a look at the zone as it has existed since the Burning Crusade. I hope to come back to Eversong soon, once Midnight is upon us, and look at how the zone has changed and analyze those differences. If you enjoy this anthropological approach to gaming, please consider subscribing. It helps us immensely as we build this series. First, let's establish the context of Eversong Woods and of Quel'Thalas. The region is nestled at the very northern tip of the Eastern Kingdoms, with the plagued lands of the former Kingdom of Lordaeron to the south past the mountains. Eversong Woods is a hilly and mountainous region surrounded by the ocean. The terrain lends itself to settlement only in the valleys and where it comes to a flatter, rolling coastal plain by the ocean. Rivers from the highlands snake across the landscape, both providing scenic views as well as dividing up the territory and separating it from the ghostlands to the south. Quite interestingly, the flora of Eversong does not at all look to be normal. We see mostly spiraling, ornate trees with golden and autumnal colors, but that never seem to lose their leaves. The smaller flora follows a similar pattern, a very manicured look even in the wilderness areas. The climate of Eversong is difficult to determine because it is clearly not natural. Given this very magical meddling happening, we'll see if there are any hints as to what this climate might be. Carved through the heart of the region, we can see the Dead Scar, a cursed trail dividing the region in two, reaching from the south where we can see the Ghostlands, the haunted, corrupted counterpart to Eversong. We see the same kind of trees, but twisted and sickly, and a landscape of gloom and undeath. It lurks to the south as a reminder of what could always happen to the beloved heartlands of the elves, and to the horrors of their recent history. In the highlands of Eversong, we can catch glimpses of a different sort of plant life and a different group of people, the Amani Trolls. The Sindori have neighbors close by, it seems, and we'll be sure to check out that relationship. The most important context to establish, however, is a little break from our in-game only fixation. The story of this region is deeply intertwined with that of the Warcraft 3 expansion, The Frozen Throne, as during these events the fallen Prince Arthas Menethil of Lordaeron marches an undead army through the area, despoiling and destroying everything in his path. Almost the entirety of the story and culture we will be seeing in Quel'Thalas is determined by this historic event, so it is extremely important to at least set up the basics. In archaeology, this might be what we would call a horizon. When the undead army came through, the elves resisted with all of their might. However, they were unable to stop the onslaught and were absolutely devastated by the destruction of their mystical font of power, the Sunwell. This quasi-religious magical artifact was a core of their culture and society, and its loss has had wide-reaching effects that we will get into more when we encounter them directly. The capital of Silvermoon City was torn in two, and the High King Anasterian Sunstrider was killed. His son and heir Kel'Thas Sunstrider has left Quel'Thalas seeking a solution for the loss of the Sunwell, leaving a regency in place. So that establishes the very basic recent historical context of what we will see. We are inherently dealing with a shattered homeland for a near-defeated people, just barely beginning to make a recovery as of the 2006 to 2008 timeline of this zone. And with that, let us see what we can find on the ground with our investigative consultant for today. Our investigator arrives on a small island off the northwestern coast, Sunstrider Isle. It looks like we are on an ornate terrace next to a rather magical-looking tower named the Sunspire. We're greeted by Magistrix Arona in front of us, but of course we're going to go ahead and take a quick look around first. The Sunspire does in fact appear to be a magical tower with numerous orbiting platforms. The architectural style is quite striking, with sweeping ornate shapes and a gilded aesthetic that screams power and wealth. Around the tower are numerous manicured shrubs and small trees. It feels suggestive of a culture that values nature, but only if it is controlled and contained. It has to fit into their perfect aesthetic. The terrace we are on is flanked by large ornate pillars with steps down to a more central area. We can see frankly ominous green crystals floating over there, but I'm sure we'll get to those here in just a bit. Looking inside the Sunspire, we can find a large array of teachers of almost every discipline, many of whom appear to be members of the Sunstriker family. Aside from them, we can see an overwhelming presence of books and plenty of cats. Nearby, we can see a smaller, less floaty structure, some sort of pavilion or outbuilding. There are numerous crafters and tradespeople in and around this one, and it's filled with crates of supplies and racks of weapons. We can see even more cats, but also enchanted brooms keeping the floors clear. Given the open-air nature of these two buildings, I would imagine having the fantasy medieval equivalent of a Roomba is probably quite handy. We head back to speak with Magistrix Arona to get some more confirmation of our bearings and get a little bit more context. She tells us about the destruction of the beloved Sunwell by Arthas and his Scourge, and how this event has cast the Sindori into uncertainty. We are here to learn while helping to aid in the recovery from that disaster. Last, but by no means least, she mentions that the Outland awaits us. This actually reveals quite a lot to us. As discussed in the context section, we can hear about the Sunwell, its destruction by Arthas and the Scourge, and that the Sindori are under existential threat. The role of our investigator here today, it seems, is to learn and grow while aiding the recovery effort. This immediately tells us something further. Everyone, at least in our societal class, is expected to help. We evidently have not yet finished learning, and we're still a student of sorts. However, we're being pressed into service for our people despite not really being fully ready, and we're expected to finish our learning on the job. But what specifically are we doing here? I imagine we are going to hear some more from the Magistrix in a moment, but we're also going to be assuming that it's not picking daisies, since most of the instructors out here seem to be for the more combat-oriented social roles. It seems likely that the Sindori have more need of combatants, not necessarily of carpenters right now. Arona then tasks us with beginning our action education by thinning the number of mana worms hovering near those ominous green crystals nearby. From what she explains, these important crystals are called burning crystals and were once used as a power source for the experiments on the island. The Wyrms, once the guardians of those crystals, are a direct threat due to the Sindori's, quote, lack of magical control over them. We head over and take a peek at those Wyrms and at the crystals, and yep, those are in fact spooky. The Wyrms don't seem overtly hostile, but we need to thin their numbers for the reclamation. Arona herself didn't mention anything about the horrifying glowing eyes reflecting from inside the crystals, so I'm a bit unsure if they're supposed to be doing that. We return to her having cleared out some Wyrms, and she says that we have made something clear she wishes were not true. The unchecked power of the burning crystals has maligned a much larger swath of the island's natural balance than she had expected, so we need to take more unfortunate measures to regain control. The nearby lynxes, much like the mana Wyrms, are evidently no longer under said magical control of the elves and need to be put down. Arona tells us that they have, quote, succumbed to the influence of the crystals, but if we bring her back some of their collars in the process of thinning them out, she can fashion some sort of magical control again. Clearly, the crystals are not supposed to be doing that at the very least. I want to take a quick moment here just to reflect on some of the very first things we have learned from the Sindori. Firstly, they seem to have lost control of at least this island, and are here with some sort of expedition to both reclaim it and train up new combatants, or, what I'm starting to suspect just based on Arona's words, agents. Secondly, the crystals on the island were part of the magical support infrastructure that was necessary for whatever the experiments here were. They themselves are now out of control and affecting the island's fauna in unknown ways, but at least it's salvageable by the magistrix. These things combined can give us some early insights into Blood Elven culture. Clearly, control in all of its forms is important. From the crystals to the worms and the lynxes, the lack of control is seen as the immediate problem to solve. From the aesthetic as well, we can get some suggestions as to what is really important to the people. Magic. It's all magic. From the buildings to what I also suspect to be magical plants, everything is designed to show off magical prowess. The more ornate and important structure here, the Sunspire, is a graceful magical tower with floating rooms. The less important pavilion storage building is distinctly less magical, but still practically glowing. We're going to keep an eye on this particular theme to see if it carries on throughout our investigation. Arona's next task for us is to speak with her assistant Lanthan Paralon. The Sunspire here is focused on dealing with the burning crystals, but we are to go and help Lanthan with a nearby location called the Falthrian Academy. Arona tells us something extremely revealing here. Quote, "Good luck. Your continued successes shall be rewarded." That is some very particular word choice. It is indicative to me of a meritocracy, where individual success is the primary measure of social reward, particularly of status. It also makes me rather curious about the nature of her title, Magistrix. We're going to keep an eye on that one as well. Before we go and speak with Lanthan, it looks like some of the other members of this expedition would also like a word with us. Solanian the Well Watcher flags us down for a quick lesson on Sindori history. He explains to us that one Dathramar's Sunstrider, their first king, led the people here from Kalimdor through the Maelstrom. He instructs us to go and pay our respects at his shrine located nearby. More than just that, however, he also has a quick task for us. Many of his study materials were strewn about the area that he now considers unsafe to recover due to the lack of control. He tasks us with recovering them while we're out in the field. Nearby, Arcanist Ithanes asks us to recover magical slivers from some of the mana-using creatures on the island. He explains that many of the creatures here on the isle were at one point bound into non-aggression by the magical skills of the elves. These slivers are the magical remnant of that control lost when the Sunwell was destroyed. We've heard about this control, of course, from Arona, but this adds some further context to it. It is interesting that their magical control leaves behind some sort of magical residue or sliver. He offers to provide us with a magical boon if we bring him back some of these, an interesting type of reward. I'm again continuing to suspect we are more of an agent, less of a mercenary. Most of our stated rewards have been status or power, or just helping our people. Lastly, we speak with Arcanist Helion, who gives us a quick lesson on the mana thirst that all Sindori now feel. Without the Sunwell nourishing and providing for our magic, we Blood Elves need to learn to control this thirst. He instructs us to unleash an arcane torrent on a nearby mana worm. Stopping for just a moment here to discuss the magical thirst of the Blood Elves, this is explicitly stated to be caused by the loss of the Sunwell. It must have functioned as a magical source that touched all Sindori, providing them with seemingly endless mana for their personal needs. The loss of that constant source has catastrophic implications on cultural and personal norms, especially given the hyper-magical society we are getting early glimpses of. Helion reinforces this idea with the very stark language he uses around the topic, a thirst unending, and failure is to become one of the wretched, hopelessly addicted and insane. This is our first mention of the wretched, and in context, this must be what happens to a Sindori that loses control of themselves to the mana thirst. We will keep an eye out for more on this topic. We quickly accost a mana worm and run its pockets for mana before returning to Helion. He tells us that we've done well, and that our willingness to learn may allow us to rise above the unyielding cravings. He further states that we need to master what we have learned here, that only through diligence will we as a race survive. He bids us to go and bring glory once more to our people. There's some interesting reflections here from Helion's lessons. We get some more of the existential threat looming over this society from his words, but also hope for a return to glory. Specifically though, he bids us to bring about that return. Moving on from Helion, it looks like our other lessons and tasks take us out into the fields past Lanthan, so we run over to speak with him at Arona's behest. He informs us that the Falthrian Academy is the enormous floating structure to the west, but that it is currently in really bad shape and we will be leading an effort to reclaim it from a wretched. He confirms what we had already implied from Helion, that wretched are blood elves who have forever succumbed to their basest cravings. This is, quote, not only a lesson about danger, but also of what happens when you forsake the realities of who you are. It sounds like the Sindori really take this seriously, and it doubles down on how catastrophic such a malignance must be on their society. If everyone across all levels feel this thirst, but giving in makes you into whatever a wretched is, that has horrific implications. We'll see if we learn some more about that soon, though for the moment Lanthan has a quick task for us first before we assault the academy. Nearby, there are magical tenders that were once used as aids for gardening, but have grown out of control and become aggressive. We need to greatly reduce their numbers to make the area safe again, the same old song and dance. He tells us that it, quote, doesn't please me to ask you to do such a task, but survival is survival. I'll mourn later. Wow, that is some heavy wording from Lanthan. Evidently, these tenders must mean quite a lot to him at the very least, but regaining control, which he links to survival here, is the more important. We head out and take a look. The tenders appear to be small humanoid treants. It certainly makes sense that they were used for gardening. We've seen a lot of signs that magic was behind most of the natural aesthetic. Now that they've lost control though, the Blood Elves see them as a threat. And to be fair, the treants are running amok across numerous terraces and platforms. They're not just in the gardens anymore. We can't for sure tell how initially aggressive they are, or if you have to mess with their flowers first, but they might well be a threat. This also furthers another idea about the culture here, that nature is a canvas to be changed to suit their taste. This fits neatly into the explicit control they have over the fauna, so assumedly it's the same feeling for the flora. Absolute control. Alright, so we have a number of tasks and lessons in the immediate area. We can see the tenders nearby running amok, so we begin clearing through them to get to those terrace platforms. On them, we can find some of Well Watcher Solanian's belongings. The tenders must be what drove him off. We collect his belongings while fending off treants, one of them being a scroll of scourge magic. It does certainly seem like he was researching some of the larger existential threats that the Sindori face. Nearby, we also stop at the shrine to Dathramar. It overlooks the sea to the west, where, from what we were told, the elves would have arrived into Quel'Thalas. It is a memorial shrine, and it explicitly states that all of the prosperity of the people of Quel'Thalas is owed to Dathramar. While paying our respects at the shrine, we feel an odd, almost insidious malaise. We leave feeling a bit disturbed and uncomfortable, and report back quickly to Solanian. He makes sure to commend us for our sense of duty and respect, but he is also concerned about that odd sensation. He believes it might be a manifestation of the taint that has befallen Sunstrider Isle. He'll keep an eye on it. We also make sure to hand him his research equipment lost across the terrace. Once it's safe to do so, he tells us that he intends to put them to good use studying the Isle. It is concerning that there is this taint, possibly something related to the Sunwell. However, it does seem like it is actually unfamiliar to the higher ranking elves here. Returning to Arcanist Ithanos with the magical slivers we acquired while clearing out tenders, he thanks us for our service and grants us a small enchantment, the Fortitude of the Sindori, that improves our stamina and versatility. He also discusses the slivers further with us, mentioning that he expects they could be used to refashion some form of control over the island. Alternatively, they could also further research into the malaise we're getting more hints about after speaking with Solanian. It further cements the idea that this malaise is perhaps entirely unknown. None of the researchers here seem to know what it is, but are all pursuing their own means of finding out more about it. Initially, they seemed to believe that the island was dangerous simply because of the loss of the Sunwell, but it seems like more might be going on here. None of the teachers or arcanists have mentioned the spooky eyes in the burning crystals, so we keep our mouth shut for now. But those are ominous. Are they really supposed to be like that? It seems like that might be, I don't know, some kind of a hint or something, but we certainly don't know enough yet. Returning to Lanthan, he expresses regret at the destruction of the Treants, but it had to be done. We are now ready, in his estimation, for our penultimate task here on the island, storming the Academy. He tells us that Falendrin, a wretched traitor, has taken over the Academy and is using his runaway magic to summon arcane wraiths. He's a traitor to society for giving in to his instincts and not heeding the warnings of his teachers. Perhaps Falendrin was like us, a student here learning on the job, but one who gave in. That is a stark but perhaps important warning from this culture. The society here seems keen to advise you of dangers, but what you do with that information is up to you. If you choose not to follow the warnings and you fall to whatever the warning was, you fail your society and face harsh punishment. It does make me wonder about the opposite. If you ignore the warnings and succeed, is there a punishment, or is that perhaps the goal? Warn students about the potential dangers so that most follow them, but the most powerful, capable, or creative can succeed at breaking that rule. Risky, but if you succeed, I bet you are lauded for it. Of course, now that you have the risk of turning wretched should you fail, the stakes are probably far higher. We hear from Lanthan that Falendrin is a direct threat to the Sunspire, so we need to put him down and bring back his head. It doesn't sound like he wants it as proof of our deed, so I wonder if he wants it as a warning. With that in mind, we trek west to the Academy and look up. I want to take a moment here to further discuss Blood Elven architecture. The Academy, and most of the other buildings we have seen so far, are open air with broad open doorways. That seems kind of insane for a place of learning where you have books and other valuable but perishable items, but it might actually suggest that their control over the flora and fauna would also extend to the weather. If you have complete control over when and where it rains, or where wind is blowing, or any other atmospheric occurrence, you can get away with these elaborate floating open-air buildings. Let's also discuss that elaborate floating design. It further cements the magic-first nature of the architecture. The more important a building is, the more obviously magical its design has to be. The Sunspire is at least a decently important structure. It has floating orbital rooms around it and is clearly magical. The Academy must have once been critically important, or at least very esteemed. The entire building is a tangle of floating stairways and platforms. At its heart, we can see an enormous burning crystal. Presumably, this is what powers the Academy and perhaps what allows it to be entirely airborne. Making our way up the rather terrifying staircases, we can fight through the arcane wraiths of Falendrin. We notice that several of them are a sickly green color, unlike the misty pale of the others. We collect a sample from one of those. This might be a clue for Arcanist Helion to study. Assaulting Falendrin, he shouts at us, threatening us, but also our friends over in the Sunspire. We also get our first look at a wretched. They're a gaunt, pale, hunched elf that seems to have totally lost it. We take his head and very carefully descend the floating academy. Speaking with Lanthan, he congratulates us and says that we have not disappointed. He tells us that the Magistrix wants us to continue on to the city of Silvermoon to aid with reclamation efforts there. We're to speak with Outrunner Alarion near the southern bridge off the island. Lanthan does give us some more context. The Outrunners are a special group of elves responsible for shuttling supplies to this island. It makes sense that we saw lots of crates, but relatively little manufacturing or local production. All of the supplies out here have to be carted in through presumably dangerous territory. We swing by and drop off the odd, tainted shard to Arcanist Helion. He finds it more disturbing than anything else we have found so far, and suspects that whatever foul source is corrupting the island must be at the heart of their challenges in reasserting control. This shard will undoubtedly help them uncover what is really going on. Heading down towards the bridge, let's reflect a little bit on what we have learned here on Sunstrider Isle. There is a core, overarching theme of control throughout Sindori culture and society. The loss of that control, though, is seen as a threat. As a big part of that, magic is the primary cultural keystone. Magic enables that all-necessary control, and mastery of magic seems to be the driving force of the aesthetic. from architecture to gardening. It is used for everyday tasks like cleaning, to the creation of ominous floating crystals as some sort of battery or generator. For the social side, our role here is interesting. We are on the island to learn on the job, but that job is the part that I want to focus on. The expedition members seem to be preparing us to be an agent, an individual in the service of another, acting as an extension of their will. On the island, we were an agent of Magistrix Arona, and to a lesser extent Solanian the Well Watcher. She definitely seems to be the leader of the reclamation expedition, and it is likely that the others, especially the Arcanists, reported to her as well. This then brings up her title, Magistrix. She was the only one on the Isle with that title, though spoke and worked with several Arcanists. I suspect that this is a rank in society, probably gained through meritocratic means given the discussion of our progress and status. Hypothesizing just a little bit, I would assume Magistrix, or the masculine Magister, to be at or near the apex of this meritocracy, with ranks like Arcanist below that. These words of course heavily imply magical prowess being a core requirement, which fits well with what we have seen on the Isle. As part of our role here, it was also frequently brought up how we are learning to better be a part of our society, to be a better Sindori. This indicates strong societal pressure towards this assumed meritocracy, at least among those people here at the Sunspire. I would wonder if this meritocratic push is as strong elsewhere in their society, or if because we are amidst one of the operations that might heavily support it, everyone here is strongly supportive of the meritocracy's methods and motives. They have a strong bias towards it, in other words. Our position here was as much helping reclaim the Isle as it was an initiation of sorts, getting us into the meritocracy, proving we can climb the ranks, and proving we are ready to take on the social responsibilities associated with it. This meritocracy has stark warnings against and punishments for failing to climb its ranks. In this case, one of those failures is represented by becoming a wretched, giving in to the base mana thirst of the Sindori. This event is seen as a betrayal of your people, a failure of your responsibilities. Becoming a wretched not only makes you a threat, it is so much more. You are despised, and seemingly also potentially losing your mind. If not from the all-consuming mana thirst, then to the complete and utter ostracization from your own society. There are some interesting implications about the past and their relation to their own history. Solanian mentions in his dialogue that he is seen as old-fashioned for his reverence towards Dathramar, to him a seemingly near mythical figure. The plaque on the shrine suggests some form of ancestral debt, that maybe reverence for Dathramar was stronger in the past. It also makes me wonder about a divide between traditionalists, those that want to double down on the old ways after the catastrophe of the recent events, versus those who are looking for future solutions, or even those working on solving the immediate right here and now problems. Here on the Isle, we seem to mostly be dealing with people focused on those immediate problems. Reclaim, quell the loss, regain control. We did have one hint from Arona though. She mentioned that their future is on the Outland. We don't have a lot of context for this yet, but we'll certainly be keeping an ear and an eye out. For now, I'm going to hypothesize that fleeing their problems to the Outland might be thinking about long-term solutions, less concerned with solving the immediate problems, and certainly not looking to the old ways and traditions for solutions. But from that, we also hear about a mysterious malaise laying over Sunstrider Isle. Something is corrupting it beyond just the loss of the Sunwell. The researchers here don't seem to have a lot of context about what's happening themselves, but they did immediately get to work looking into it. Their expedition here seems as much about territory as it does about academics and magical theory, and that makes sense if they're sending people to reclaim an important magical academy. Originally, some of these researchers were probably students or teachers at said academy, but also if you've lost control of the magic here, you will probably need some real theory-focused people to fix the problems. On a broad scale, we get some other hints about Blood Elf society from the Isle. Their control, both literal and figurative, seems to have been rather top-heavy. Once that high-end control was lost, a cascade effect made them lose control of everything. Without that magical control, they have no control at all. For now, let's speak with Outrunner Alarion and get farther onto the mainland. She mentions she has heard that we were a useful agent for Arona and asks us for some help locating a missing Outrunner in the ruins of Silvermoon. She suspects the wretched were involved. We poke just barely into the ruins past the gate and glance about. This area does seem more or less abandoned by the Sindori, but we can see hints farther in. I'm sure we will be investigating this more here shortly. We find the slain Outrunner on the road just meters from safety. We grab the package they were carrying and bring it back to Alarion. She mentions it is the third Outrunner they have lost this month, so clearly it is extremely dangerous to traverse these ruins. She tells us this is a risk they all accept and we need to get this package to Falconwing Square, at the other end of the abandoned ruined half of Silvermoon, with all haste. Clearly, these Outrunners have a lot of pride in their duty and responsibilities, and are willing to lay down their lives on these dangerous routes. Does seem like that civic duty, meritocracy part of the society coming through. But it is now our responsibility to get this package through. We stick to the central, raised causeway that has the occasional patrolling guard watching for danger, and we can see these ornate winged pillars flanking the central causeway with overgrown, overrun buildings to either side with broken windows. All around us we can see and hear the wretched lurking in the abandoned wreckage of their former home. Forlorn gardens surround once glorious statues of elves, either old heroes or important figures, now just a testament to all that has been lost. We make it into Falconwing Square at the far end of the causeway, and we take a peek at what looks to be a hub for the reclamation expeditions. At its heart, there is an ornate fountain with everyone from magisters to rangers and merchants scattered around and preparing. Let's expand on that hub idea a little bit here. This looks at first glance like the sort of place that expeditions or individual agents are based out of for the continuing reclamation efforts. It is pretty clear that the supplies for Sunstrider Isle came from here. It does seem likely that the main way of getting things done is through these agents. Higher-ranking individuals like the magisters will respond to a problem by sending out their minions on an operation. We've seen some, like the Arcanists, that have specific focuses and tasks, and others like ourselves and Lanthan that seem to have more general tasks. I do wonder though how autonomous these magisters are. Arona didn't mention anything about reporting in to any central forces or agencies. We will want to keep an ear and an eye out for any hints here as to a central power structure and who, if anyone, they report to. We do see some tidbits here that might be related. We see rangers and guardians that suggest a more direct representation of Silvermoon's government, such as it is. Rather than magisters and their agents, these seem to be more organized traditional military forces, presumably reporting to somebody. They seem particularly focused on solving those immediate problems based on what we're seeing here. We hand in the package from Arona to the innkeeper while looking around. The inn itself is quite interesting to analyze. Ornate, arched construction is accentuated by translucent, expensive-looking silks. Scattered around appear to be hookahs and quite a few lounging areas. And there are plenty of books. I do wonder if many of these are recovered from the ruins and other areas and being held here for safety. The bar also looks quite well stocked, probably so all of the coming and going agents and rangers can get a drink. And there does seem to be even more trainers here. Likely there are other up-and-coming agents that need their expertise, much like the ones we saw in the Sunspire. The amount of supplies we see doubles down on Falconwing Square being a hub for expeditions and the source of most of their supplies. Looking at those supplies a little more closely, the majority of the foodstuff seems to be predominantly fruits and maybe some grains, and possibly even some actual sacks of flowers? The other nearby reclaimed building looks a bit more martial, with numerous physical combatants housed inside. It seems like it might be the local ranger headquarters with stocks of weapons and armor, alongside tradesmen offering further equipment and repairs. Nearby, an elf named Slayan hawks his goods from a wagon a little ways away from the others. He implies he has goods to help with the wretched, so long as we don't ask where they came from. Seems likely he's a looter or a salvager, but operating quite openly, if just a little bit carefully. All of this taken together suggests that the Sindori once had a very ornate culture with a love for sensory experiences. Now, those sensory experiences seem like they might be a necessary escape from a harsh reality, one represented by the well-armed ranger headquarters right next door. Slayan's presence suggests that looting and salvaging are necessary, and we can imply that a lot of the same is happening on a very societal level as well, as the Sindori recover and try to adapt to this cruel new world. Back out by the fountain, Magister Geronis flags us down with an operation. He explains the arcane patrollers to us, old constructs built by their forefathers to protect this city. However, they've recently fallen into disrepair and gone rogue, just another sign of the loss of that top-heavy control. The very devices meant to protect them are now a threat. He would like us to stop these rogue arcane patrollers and recover their arcane cores if we can. He hopes to put them to good use. So here we have an immediate confirmation of that salvaging idea. We need to recover pieces of our glory, very literal in this sense, and build a new foundation out of them. It's also interesting that the Sindori have a history of using autonomous weaponry like these patrollers. I wonder if historically their culture has not had such a martial bent to it, outsourcing physical combat to automata. Perhaps it is only recently that martial pursuits have become shockingly more important. Nearby, Eldon Sunbrand, captain of the Bloodhawks, tells us that a group of wretched recently raided a supply of unstable mana crystals from an arcane sanctum. These highly unstable crystals could explode at any time, and he would rather not have a fun new hole blown into the wall. He doesn't want the reputational hit for himself or his men. It seems even the military must operate within the ideology of the meritocracy here. We are to go and hunt down the crystals from the wretched. It seems likely they were trying to use these crystals as a mana source for their thirst. Next to Eldon is a bounty board and a novice ranger. We see a bounty for Thalis the Hungerer, a wretched. The novice ranger states that they may consider going for him as well now that there's a bounty. That's kind of interesting. Is he only interested in the reputation from the bounty or the gold? I wonder if the rangers have a harder time climbing the meritocracy since they get less random tasks than we do as an independent agent, and they're not climbing the ranks of magisters. Sergeant Canran nearby has a wretched in his custody. Taking a closer look at a wretched not trying to remove our internal organs, we can see that this is a stark, harsh physical transformation. The wretched calls out, quote, "Please, I must feed on something soon. A mana crystal, a shard, anything. The pain is unbearable." That is dark. It certainly seems like the mana thirst causes physical and mental anguish, even before a wretched has gone completely insane, or just in potential moments of lucidity. From here, we need to proceed into the ruins we passed on the causeway. The patrollers are quite easy to spot, clunking around the area. When we engage one, it spouts old canned messages like "serve the public trust" and "protect the innocent" that suggest some of how the old public safety system worked before the public became the unsafety. We yoink the power cores from the patrollers that we can safely engage, and nearby we find discarded crates of those unstable mana crystals. It seems like the wretched have either realized how dangerous they are, or are unable to use them for their needs. We overhear one of the wretched calling out, seemingly talking to itself, quote, "I cannot stand the pain. I must find a new source." They are really suffering in here, but it seems like there is nothing we can do. I don't know, and we haven't been told if the Magisters and Arcanists have been unable, or if they were unwilling to find a solution for the wretched, but they seem to treat them as if they are an incurable plague that must be cleansed. We hunt down Thalis the Hungerer in the ruins of the Common Hall, hiding out with several other wretched. They don't seem all that inclined to spring to his defense though, eyeing us warily from a distance as we remove his head. We take this opportunity to further explore the ruins on this side of Silvermoon. Littered around we can find dormant brooms, once enchanted to keep these streets clean. Roaming smaller ruby tenders lurk under bushes, peering at us as they protect their hedges. We find what looks like it was once a noble estate house with ornate beds and wreckage strewn about the top floor. Random supplies seem stockpiled here, probably by desperate wretched trying to survive this apocalypse. Nearby, other ornate structures require arcane magic to traverse that is now dormant, husks of buildings once grand. Books lay strewn about, collected wisdom of the ages no longer worth any more than the material of the pages themselves. We carefully returned to the square, having seen horrors in these ruins, but leaving far more of the horror unseen. Sergeant Canron quietly takes Thalus's head from us, remarking only that things should be quiet with the wretched for a while. It's a grim reminder that these are the everyday challenges of the Sindori, watching former friends, neighbors, and family fall into insanity and hunger while all they can do is hunt them down. We drop off the collected arcane cores salvaged from the wreckage of greatness to Geronis. He comments that without the arcane sanctums working at full capacity, these will go a long way in supplementing their needs. He doesn't elaborate, but from what we've seen, I can guess at his meaning. We hand the recovered unstable mana crystals to Captain Aelden. He, like Canron, takes them quietly. There's a new problem already, reports of night elves that he assumes are fictitious, but we need to investigate them all the same. One of those reports came from near the West Sanctum, one of those arcane sanctums that Geronis just mentioned to us. It has malfunctioned and rumors swirl of Darnashian sabotage. Out of game for a moment, Darnassus was the capital of the Kaldori, the Night Elves back on the continent of Kalimdor at this point in the story. Captain Aelden tasks us with checking in on Laykeeper Volania. So these sanctums potentially harness ley lines. Magister Geronis chimes in from the other side and would like us to also check in with Laykeeper Kaidanis at the North Sanctum, and he hands us a letter for him. This unmarked letter does seem to be blank. Clearly there's some form of magical writing not meant for us. Before we head out from Falconwing, let's collect our thoughts here. This was a grim area with some very dark tones when we analyze it. This half of the city has clearly not yet been reclaimed, only the central causeway has any protection at all. Falconwing Square looks like it serves as a staging ground and hub for other reclamation efforts. It is interesting that this half of the city does not seem to be a focus for immediate action though. Most of what we were involved in is simply reactionary to recent events here. They're not actively working on retaking this side of the city, simply keeping threats here contained. What we do see on this side of the city suggests something like a garden city or a special district, potentially a noble district with fewer, more ornate buildings spaced out amongst gardens and statues. The staging ground here gives us fascinating insights into Sindori culture both before and now after the Scourge invasion. We get hints at a materialistic culture that valued sensory experiences. From the inn, we get the idea that these sensory experiences continue and have probably become something of a helping hand or even a necessary helping hand to get the Blood Elves through another day. I can easily imagine many of the grim, overworked rangers or arcanists coming in here to socialize in the hookah lounge, or retiring to a quieter alcove with one of the many books to try to relieve some of that pressure. Next door, there's the well-stocked and well-staffed ranger headquarters, where Silvermoon guardians and rangers operate out of, trying to ensure the safety of the expeditions and reclamation efforts. These stoic souls seem to bear the brunt of the darkest work, hunting down their former compatriots when they lose control. The wretched are a very dark reminder of the desperate situation the Sindori are in. They lost a major cultural and societal touchstone in the Sunwell, but also a very literal and tangible physical part of their existence. That all-consuming thirst can quite easily drive them mad, cause them to cross a line. Once that happens, they're little better than monsters to their friends, family, and loved ones. The Rangers or the Guardians will come out to put an end to you. Imagine the pressure every surviving member of society faces. Not only do you have to succeed to achieve great things for what few of your people remain, but you also need to explicitly not fail. Failure makes you a threat. We can also get some more data about the societal hierarchies and structure here. More than just magisters and arcanists, we now see rangers, guardians, and captains. I would posit based on these other ranks here and the jobs they're fulfilling that this is something of a parallel path up the meritocracy, perhaps one that tops out a little bit lower than the magisters given the magical acumen. In my hypothesis here, I can see a society where young adults or their families involved in this meritocracy choose one of these paths relatively early on, and climb the ranks through their actions and influence. It seems from what we have heard and been told that this more martial path may be slower to climb, but that the Magisters probably have a riskier path to the top and require great magical prowess. We're also hearing more about the agent setup. We continue to see how we serve these different higher ranking individuals and how they refer to our progress and merit alongside the service we do for our people. Nobody so far has advertised paying us in money or equipment as the primary reward. Given the meritocracy we are seeing, I also hypothesize that agents are a great bit of plausible deniability. Should your agent fail, you can distance yourself from them to mitigate some of the merit loss and divert it to them. It may also help with layers of separation from the unfortunate measures we keep having to resort to. And of course, we have a discussion of scale. So far, it feels like we are seeing explicit snapshots of specific important locations, not necessarily a complete, if scaled down, landscape. Here's the Isle, here is the city, but what is in between feels like it's not intended to be directly representative of the area. We're going to see more of this, I suspect, so as we head out from the ruins of Silvermoon, let's keep our eyes open for more snapshot locations. One could almost call it a theme park. As we enter the primary woodlands of Eversong, we can see many more of the ornate spiraling autumnal trees with feral dragonhawks flitting amongst them. It's unclear if these dragonhawks were once controlled and are now feral like the lynxes due to the loss of that controlling magic. We also see the presence of armed guards patrolling the lantern-lit roads and pathways. Beyond that, the wilderness of Eversong seems quite managed, though we do see some prowling threats from the loss of control. To our east, we can see the Dead Scar, but we're not touching on that just yet. We're going to keep in mind that it is there though, as I am sure all Sindori must. Immediately to our west, we can see one of the arcane sanctums, the North Sanctum, run by Laykeeper Kaidanis, whom we have a magical letter for. We pass by an apprentice Vea, who we were told should be watching the malfunctioning West Sanctum. I am not quite sure what she's doing here at the North Sanctum, though I imagine we will hear more shortly. Kaidanis appears to be meeting with Ambassador Anvilward, a dwarf, and as we deliver the letter to Kaidanis, there doesn't seem to be any love lost between them. He directs us to speak with Laykeeper Valania, or her apprentice Vea, at the West Sanctum as well, doubling down on help being needed over there. Since we can see that Vea is over here, I imagine she was also sent to find some help. As we make our way over there and cross the bridge, we meet with Valania a good distance from the West Sanctum. It's very evident that something is wrong. Valania tells us that there has been a severe malfunction and that she is focused on preventing the situation from getting worse. She also calls Kaidanis a dimwit for taking so long to send her help, and that she also warned of the dangers of increasing the magical load on the Western Sanctum. It seems like an overload must be what happened from too much strain, though theoretically sabotage could still have been involved. I wonder if what we heard earlier about fewer and fewer sanctums being operational forced these Blood Elves to put more strain on the handful of operational ones like the West Sanctum must have been. Valania tells us that an energy converter exploded and now arcane wraiths are pouring out of the sanctum. That seems like a bit of an oopsie. She needs us to get rid of the wraiths so that they can get somebody in there to repair the sanctum. These particular wraiths seem very similar to what Felendrin back at the Falthrian Academy was summoning. I wonder if these are some sort of pure mana or energy manifestation. They do explode into raw mana when we defeat them, so I'm also surprised this area is not swarming with wretched. We cleared them out, but don't find any clues to any sabotage in the sanctum itself. As we investigate the surrounding area though, we are jumped and attacked by a Darnassian scout, a night elf that was skulking in the nearby woods. We defend ourselves and find detailed plans and maps to strategic structures around Eversong, but we can't understand the language that accompanies the rest of it. I'll bet that Captain Eldon, back in Falconwing, wants to see these. We quickly report back to Valania about the wraiths and the night elves, and she advises that we hurry back to Falconwing to speak with Captain Eldon's Sunbrand, as we expected. Our dutiful little agent does just so, and speaking with him we learn that the letters are written in Dwarven. That is very suspicious. The writer did not cause the malfunction at the Sanctum, but was sent here to spy on the results, calling the efforts of the Sindori reckless and dangerous. Captain Eldon suspects the Dwarven ambassador, since he's the only dwarf in the area, makes sense, and states that they were all fools to trust anyone belonging to the Alliance. It certainly sounds like there is some nasty history there. Eldon decides that our best course of action is to just straight up assassinate the ambassador. That is a pretty quick move to jump to, and it makes me wonder who Eldon draws his authority and orders from. Is he high enough ranked in the meritocracy to just sort of make calls like that? Equally interesting, he wants us to do it quietly, not to prevent Ironforge from learning that we assassinated their spy ambassador, but to prevent other Blood Elves from hearing that the elves here allowed a spy past in the first place. He seems to be much more concerned about the merit hit from his peers than the blowback from the Alliance. We're the agent, so we head back over there and lure the ambassador inside the North Sanctum to do it quickly and quietly. It's done without much fuss, and we bring the dwarven head back to Eldon. He congratulates us and mentions that word has been sent to the Ranger General, and that the dwarves will pay for their treason. Let's discuss this little event for a moment, because there's a lot to unpack. Night Elves and a dwarf were spying on the Sindori and not offering any aid at all. In fact, the Darnashian scouts attacked us on sight, despite the fact that we were just trying to get the Sanctum under control. Further, the Dwarven ambassador was nominally here only to collect more information, equally offering no support or help to the Sindori in what is clearly a rather catastrophic time of need. We know that Eldon, and by extension probably most of the Rangers, don't really think much of the Alliance, but it seems like the Alliance is equally happy to let the Blood Elves collapse up here in Quel'Thalas. The captain's main concern is not reprisal for killing someone who was again nominally an ambassador. No, his main concern is word getting out to his peers and him losing rank or trust. It suggests political assassination is, or was, not an uncommon occurrence for the Sindori. In any case, he compliments us on a job well done, and everything for him seems to be just routine. This is probably just an expected part of his job and role. Politics as much as combat and protecting the local area. We are then tasked with heading on to Fairbreeze Village to the south, where one of his ranger peers was investigating wretched attacks on a nearby shipyard and requested reinforcements. Eldon has no reinforcements to send, we've seen exactly why, so he can only really send us as an agent. Discussing that role just a little bit more, it does seem like a lot of our specific tasks as an agent are to be a quick patch-up job before a more specialized individual can permanently fix a problem, or a larger number of troops can reinforce the area. Wraiths in the Sanctum, we clear them out so that somebody can fix it. Wretching causing problems in the city, we kill their leader to cow them for a little while. It's a bit like we are the flexible and immediate, but temporary solution until the meritocracy can get somebody more specially trained for a job to do it. So few elves are left that we are sort of the pressure release valve on all of these problems. I'm imagining a bunch of the Magisters and Rangers staring at 24 problems each, gauging which ones need an immediate, albeit temporary, hammer to the face. These sanctums are also an interesting thing to reflect on. They have ley keepers, so presumably interface with ley lines. Contextually, I'm going to assume that ley lines are semi-permanent sources of power that have geographic significance. Points where they are easier to access, where they cross and you can double up, or where they're just more potent. With the loss of the Sunwell, and some shenanigans going on with a lot of their other magical sources like the burning crystals, it seems likely these sanctums jumped dramatically in importance, but this has also caused problems. It looks like a combination of heavy load as well as potentially some incompetence on the part of a laykeeper like Kaidanis were responsible for this malfunction. I almost wonder if, up until recently, being a laykeeper may have been an easy way to send an otherwise unwanted or mediocre or problematic magister out to the country, lower their influence a bit, maybe get rid of a rival with something like a ceremonial post that they can't really say no to. Of course, now that the sanctums are extremely important, these gotten rid of magisters are suddenly both important, but also responsible for a lot of duties. On the road south towards Fairbreeze, we are stopped by apprentice Raylan near a wagon, with crates and books strewn about haphazardly. He tells us that he and his fellow apprentice were accosted by Wretched, who took everything remotely magical from mana crystals to spellbooks. Melidor, the other apprentice, went running off after them. Checking in with apprentice Melidor, he claims to have scared off most of the wretched with a well-placed fireball. Unfortunately, they dumped most of what they were hauling into the river. This includes his master's elemental grimoire. Melidor, quite strangely and unnervingly, offers to pay us in gold if we're willing to help him. This immediately raises some red flags for us, since we have rarely, if at all, been given tasks specifically in exchange for gold. I wonder if this might be because we are a higher merit rank than Melidor, or if he is breaking some sort of bounds here and needs to offer further incentive to us. We go diving into the river, and luckily our agent's magical glowy important object vision helps us locate the book quite quickly. Less fortunately, the book is soaked and likely ruined. Melidor further offers to pay us to take the book to his master and say we dropped it in a puddle. Evidently, his master holds no direct authority over us and so would not be able to punish us. Further alarms are ringing here, as once again Melidor is focusing on paying us to do this task. It's clearly outside the purview of the normal agent structure and meritocracy's methods. I'm not sure why his master would have no authority over us, and I find this a dubious line of logic here, but it may be that we have moved far enough up the meritocracy to be too high ranked, or because we are an agent for important folks like Captain Sunbrand that he's not able to. We reroute east towards the lecture area we were told to head to. However, in order to get there, we need to cross the Dead Scar. It is a dark, corrupted path that cuts directly north through Eversong and divides the region in half. We find a ranger, Jayla, near where the scar intercedes with the old main gate of Silvermoon City, fending off skeletons alongside a company of other rangers. It looks like they could use a hand, so we jump in to help. Jayla quickly explains that undead constantly take the scar from the Ghostlands to threaten Silvermoon, and she needs us to help stem the current wave to take off the pressure. We start downing skeletons left and right, and can see bones and other detritus littering the scar. Old siege weapons, scourge meat wagons from the looks of them, can be seen scattered about. Dead trees and plants linger, a reminder that more than walking bones are a threat from the scar. After we take down plenty of skeletons, we return to Ranger Jayla to check in. On the way, we get a good look at the old main gate. It looks like it was a central boulevard or causeway, and that the two halves of Silvermoon were linked through this causeway. It's now collapsed and ruined, much like the fallen side of the city we have been through. Jayla thanks us for our aid, but comments that the scourge attacks will not be letting up anytime soon. I can only imagine that a defense like this takes an enormous toll on the guards, even if the skeletons aren't individually that threatening to the elite rangers. Attrition and the constant nature of the threat are going to be a problem for them. We continue east from here, passing several camps of Blood Elves as well as a Dragonhawk Master outside the Shepherd's Gate into the remaining intact side of Silvermoon. Dragonhawks are certainly a weird and fascinating species, we might learn more about them later. We find Master Anthiol lecturing to a class of students near a pond and pull him aside to discuss his apprentices. He outright thanks us for telling him what happened, so evidently we are not following Melidor's plan, though we didn't really pick anything, and he tells us that we should, quote, take the lessons to heart that you should never trust somebody else to lie for you. He presents us with a wand to discipline the two apprentices back west. Apparently his magical tracking tells him they're still near where we first met them. It seems we were right to be suspicious of Melidor's offer to pay us. The meritocracy evidently has no time for somebody who will pay others to do menial tasks beneath their meritocratic expectations. You should do those yourself. Further, Anthiol's comment suggests that Sindori culture does not appreciate those who cannot successfully politic or lie for themselves. Presumably, it is much more tolerant of those who can play the game, but if you can't, there is a punishment for failing. Don't try to break the rules if you're not going to succeed. If you can get away with it though, great. We've seen this before back at the Falthrian Academy. We scuttle back across the Dead Scar, keeping an eye out for undead, and use the wand on the two apprentices. Evidently, this is a wand of polymorph, and from their commentary, not necessarily the first time it has been used on these two nincompoops. Once more crossing back over the extremely dangerous Dead Scar to report back to Anthiol, he allays any concerns that they would be stuck like that forever. He does comment though that they won't get their apprenticeships back until they regain their true forms. Reflecting a bit on this quest with the apprentices, and what we can see of this northern section of the Dead Scar, we can get a few insights. For one, the Dead Scar is clearly a very physical, present reminder of the Scourge invasion. More than that, however, it is clearly still a very present danger as well. The rangers that have to keep it contained must take some awful attrition. It's no wonder the rangers can rarely afford reinforcements for anywhere else. Most of their ranks are probably held up either on the Scar or recovering from a tour on it. On a macro level, crossing the Dead Scar is no mean feat. It must make logistics between the two sides of Eversong a nightmare, and logistical staging hubs like Falconwing all the more important. The apprentices and instructor Anthiol give us some hints about the magisters, the meritocracy, and the early days for young Sindori learning the ropes. Certain actions such as lying or cheating could be tolerated if you can get away with them. If you don't, you are punished, not just because you lied or cheated. Instead, some of the punishment seems to be for failing to lie or cheat successfully. These are as much lessons about succeeding in the political meritocracy as they are learning the basics of magic or whatever other topic you are a student of. Politics isn't a separate course, it is a part of all of the courses, much as it must be a part of daily life here for all of the Sindori. Getting back down to the road, we follow the patrolled road south until we eventually come across Fairbreeze Village up in the hills a little bit. In the woods along the way, we can see more feral lynx. Possibly these were once under magical control, but now they are quite aggressive. The village itself is quite interesting. This is our first real look at a distinct settlement away from Silvermoon City. Unfortunately, it is missing something I was hoping we would get a look at. We see no evidence of any agricultural practices here, nor in any of the areas we have already explored. We'll have to keep an eye out for any hints at agriculture throughout the rest of Eversong, but if we don't find any hints to it, we may need to resort to making some educated guesses at the practices of the Sindori in that regard. In the center of the village is a large building with multiple tiers to it. Nearby, a single round structure like those we've seen before. It looks like we are going to need to do some interpreting of scale here. The central building seems likely to be both the inn and hub of the village, something we've seen before in both Falconwing and in the ruined sections of Silvermoon. That smaller separate building is probably representative of the individual homes and other work structures we would see in a village like this. It is ornate, but far less magical, relatively speaking. The sweeping magical ornate nature of the central building falls in line with what we have discussed previously about Sindori architecture. The more important a building is, the more magical and elevated it will be. I feel like a bit of an archaeology joke is warranted here. Those old processual archaeologists would probably have a field day with some mathematical formula relating average magical height of a Sindori structure to societal ritual importance. Back to the elves, we see quite a few stationed or staying here. Presumably, Fairbreeze is another staging point for reclamation missions, as well as a bit of a community hub of sorts. There are a lot of supply crates in and around the village. We speak with Ranger Degolian on one of the upper levels of the central building, keeping a lookout towards the anchorage. It seems things are worse than expected, and the wretched have actually taken over the Suncell anchorage in its entirety. Reinforcements were requested to retake the anchorage, but we know the situation with the Rangers and the Guardians. For now, we're going to make a preliminary attack to soften up the wretched and try to contain the threat, push them back a little bit. We are flagged down by Ardane Riverwind inside the inn. They discuss the foul taint of the Scourge with us, the malignant corruption that seeps into the ground. Evidently, the Sindori have been hoping the ancient wardstones erected along the Eversong border would help keep it contained. Ardane would like us to go find their sister near one of these wardstones that was damaged during the invasion. The elves resorted to scorched earth to contain the blight, and his sister has been keeping an eye on things. He'd like to check in to see if she needs any help. Nearby, Sathiel stops us for a moment to welcome us to the village, but they're beginning to run low on supplies and waiting for Silvermoon to send the promised material assistance. She asks if we could check in at the city to hurry things along. We might need to talk to the Dragonhawk Master given the dangers in crossing the Scar. We'll file that away for now. Not only are there immediate dangerous threats here, but we want to explore Silvermoon at a better, later time. We see a barricade and ranger outpost just south of the village along the main road. It looks like the rangers here, much like the ones up north, are holding off Scourge from the Dead Scar and Ghostlands. Their commander, Ranger Saren, asks if we can take out some of the undead in the Scar while out and about to reduce the constant threat. We're also going to keep an eye out for Reapers just in case there's any indoctrination happening. Velen Brightoak stops us as we head back towards the village. He is evidently a tradesman and sees to the equipment of the rangers. He asks us if we can acquire some lynx pelts, evidently a luxurious item, since even night elves will poach them. He needs the pelts to help repair and maintain the equipment I am sure the rangers go through at a disgusting rate. Last, but certainly not least, because I don't want to be turned into a pig, Magistrix Landra Dawnstrider speaks with us. She has seen us scuttling around schmoozing with the entire village, and has a few tasks for us as her agent as well. She tells us it is shameful that the Sindori have lost so much of what they used to call home, but it will not be long before they regain their strength and can retake some of their southern lands. Firstly, she would like us to check in with one Lord Southrill. He is a noble and keeps making inane requests of her for random party supplies. She would like us to, in her stead, go see what he needs and take care of it so she can get back to more important work. Evidently, he and his sycophants, in her words, are living in denial about the Scourge attacks. That is very, very interesting. We definitely want to check out this Southrill and get some more hints about the nobility here. Secondly, she would like us to go and check on one of her apprentices. She embarked on a very dangerous line of research at the East Sanctum in the Dead Scar, and the Magistrix is quite worried for her. Wow, that is a lot to go over here. It's quite obvious that Fairbreeze is indeed a staging area. All of these different groups are embarked on their own distinct missions trying to reclaim Eversong or hold on to what has already been reclaimed. The Dead Scar and Ghostlands sound like an even more existential threat to this village, and almost all of their combat power is tied up dealing with that. However, all of these outbound missions do need that military support, and it sounds like we're the best suited, if not the only, agent for that job. First and foremost though, let's get over to the anchorage since that was our original operation from Captain Eldon. It also looks like Lord Southrill's estate is on the way, so maybe we can stop in there to check on the nobles. From a distance, it looks like quite the party, fireworks and all. We find Lord Southrill standing next to another member of the Sunstriker family in an ornate, if not over-large building next to the main party. It looks like he has an entire terrace or plinth of some sort for the main event. The partygoers appear to be a mix of magisters, arcanists, tradesfolk, other nobles, but notably few if any rangers or guardians that we can tell from just a glance. Southrill sarcastically comments that it is good of the Magistrix to finally send someone to handle his oh-so-simple requests. He says that he should take up the matter of her attitude with the Regent Lord in Silvermoon. Now that is a complex statement to unpack. I am wondering what the role of the nobility here in Quel'Thalas is, given the strong presence of the meritocracy that we've seen so far. I wonder if the nobility might be separate, or have some sort of enormous advantage in that meritocracy. From what we've seen, I would hypothesize that nobles are probably inherently separate from the meritocracy, unless they choose to take on a role within it, such as becoming a magister or a ranger. At that point though, I would surmise they still have to work up the ranks, but probably have a huge leg up given their name and privilege. Otherwise, I would assume that nobles are probably a very traditional bunch that have a lot of influence over Silvermoon proper, but seem quite at odds with the branches of the meritocracy like the magisters, rangers, and the military like the guardians. Southrill goes on to tell us that he needs more supplies collected from across Eversong, and even from Silvermoon itself to keep his party going. Nearby, Elisara Sunstriker interjects that she is grateful that Southrill throws these every night to keep the nastiness to the south just kind of going away. It's quite clear that these parties are a response to the trauma of the invasion, and an attempt to kind of forget about their troubles, if only for a while. It does seem like some of the nobles, like Southrill, have gone a little bit too far, and the Magistrix is correct that they are fully in denial of the current situation. They're clinging to any piece of the past that they can, having parties, being nobles, enjoying sensory delights, all while others desperately fight to protect and reclaim their homeland. We'll discuss the nobles and Lord Southrill a little bit more once we've tracked down all of his supplies, though that will be in our discussion of Silvermoon. For now, let's get down to the Sunsail anchorage. We take the main road back north a little ways out of the hills, and then follow the western road towards the coast. Along the way, we spot a small ranger camp defending against the wretched. We see a couple of sailors and their captain here as well. A Valendrous Whitemorn flags us down and tells us that the wretched are growing more coordinated, and that many of the rangers' and guards' weapons had to be left behind in the initial attack on the anchorage. He would like us to look around and recover as many as we can, both to help rearm the rangers and to keep the wretched from using those weapons. It sounds like this was a truly unexpected surprise attack. I wonder if there had been some serious underestimating of the wretched, almost as if the Sindori refused to accept the capabilities they have, cannot acknowledge them due to their hatred and disdain for what they themselves could become. Captain Kelly Sendra jumps in as soon as we have finished with Whitemorn. She tells us that Grimscale Murlocs, of all things, pirated the remainder of her cargo after the wretched took anything of magical value. If we could, she would like us to recover that cargo from the Murlocs along the coast. We tell both of them that we'll keep an eye out as we assault the shipyard, of course our primary objective. On our approach, we can see an enormous magical hook mounted to the main structure. I would guess this was probably used to either pull the ships out of the water into dry dock, or heavy cargo items off of the ships. The initial wretched we engage seem to have little more than improvised weaponry, but there are a lot of them. I'm gonna guess they were probably able to overwhelm the defenders with numbers, especially since this seems like it was considered a low-risk area. Most of the guards look like they were assigned elsewhere, like the Dead Scar. We recover what weapons we can and cut down as many of the outlying wretched as we can safely take on. Returning back to Valendrous with the weapons, he claims that the wretched are oblivious, gorging themselves on the magic remaining in the anchorage. It's the perfect time to go for their leader, Alderon the Reckless. Straight into the heart of the beast, we charge up the anchorage, fighting through many wretched until we can get to Alderon at the very top. It looks like the wretched had piled pillows and collected loose hookahs up here, perhaps having a bit of a party to celebrate their newfound wealth and mana. We take Alderon's head back down to Valendrous, and he thanks us for our service and jokes that his men must have softened up many of the wretched. So he is the Ranger Commander. He just doesn't quite look the part from what we've seen before. I do wonder if he is more of an administrator and then technically in charge of the garrison. He does tell us that we will do well for ourselves if we keep our nose clean. Once again, we're out here acting as an agent and building merit for that latter. I wonder if it's advantageous to have a diversity of folks from across society that we've supported, who would support us in turn. A range of people willing to vouch for us on the latter, write some letters of recommendation or something. We've definitely softened up the wretched here, and with their leader dead, it should be easy enough for the Rangers or Guardians to fully retake the anchorage. Before we head back, however, we do still need to help out the sea captain. Heading out the inlet towards the coast, we can find the Grimscale set up along the shoreline. There are a lot of Murlocs here, and we do in fact find a bunch of Captain Kelly Sendra's cargo. It's somewhat unclear if these Murlocs have been here for a while, or if they moved in after the elves lost control of Eversong following the invasion. We do see a number of chopped down trees as well. I'm going to guess these were probably chopped down by the shipyard, not by the Murlocs, given that the cut point would require 3 Murlocs standing on top of each other, then using an axe. While taking back the captain's cargo from the Murlocs, politely, we also come across some navigational charts and rudders. These could only belong to the captain, so we take them with us. Up on a hill overlooking the coast, we do catch sight of an elven tent, and what looks like it might be a ranger camped out up here. We head up and speak with Hathvelian Sungaze. He mentions that the tranquil shore has been taken over by the Murlocs, so that answers that question. He wants us to kill a large number of those Murlocs and take their heads as trophies, a warning to the others to see if we can scare them off. That is dark, even a little more vicious than the tasks we've already done in retaking Eversong so far. While cutting down Murlocs for Hathvelian, we somehow cannot get a head from every Murloc. I'm not sure if it's because not enough of their heads are left after our kitty here gets through them, or if for some reason not everyone is worth becoming a trophy warning head. I guess let that be a lesson, make sure your head is trophy worthy. Discussing for a moment while we commit mass Murloc murder, the Sindori so far have shown a casualness, a callousness to death. Many have expressed regret at what is seen as necessary killing, but in that there is a whatever it takes mentality. It does seem like violence is, at least given the current situation, often the first course of action. The enormous stakes and tragedy have made other, often slower courses of action far less desirable to the Blood Elves. Returning to Hathvelion, he tells us that the Rangers of the Farstrider Retreat are, quote, dedicated to setting right the damage that has been wreaked upon our fair lands. We will go to any length to do so. That's a very revealing line of dialogue. It sounds like both a mission statement and like there's a lot of guilt in there. Perhaps that is for failures during the Scourge invasion that caused all of this. He compliments us on our brand new collection of heads and wonders if they might be good in a stew. It's impossible to tell if this stoic elf is joking or if he's seriously considering it. He also laments that so far it seems like our actions have had no effect on the Murlocs. They're still camped out on the shoreline. He wants us to take more direct action. Hunt down their leader Murgle. This may cause the Murlocs to flee, but will also get revenge for a slain compatriot of Hathvelion's. So there is some personal history here. He would like us to recover a ring taken from his fallen companion by the Murlocs, and this should, quote, see these monsters cowed. Overall, this suggests that either the Murlocs have been at least a recurring problem, or have been here for a longer period of time. Hathvelion seems to have a deep personal hatred of the Murlocs, or he is projecting his hatred of the Scourge and other threats onto them as something he can take direct action against. There might be some rage and guilt that runs deep, and the heightened violence from the elves we are seeing may be the result of that. Hunting along the shoreline, we easily find Murgle. They are much larger than the other Murlocs, suggesting several things about their organizational method and their biology. It could be that the largest Murloc is sort of automatically the leader. Alternatively, it could be that many of the other Murlocs are actually malnourished or have biologically hampered growth, but the leader gets the most food or otherwise less hampered growth due to their biology. We slay this leader, taking the now tarnished and slimy ring, and bring it back to Hathvelion. He was impressed by our prowess, and though it did not cause the Murlocs to fully rout, it was, quote, entertaining to watch them panic in confusion. He offers us a new weapon, and returns to glaring at the Murlocs on the shore. We carefully make our way back towards the anchorage, meeting up with the small ranger camp. Returning the salvaged cargo to Captain Kelisendra, along with her navigational charts and routers, she has a number of interesting things to say. Firstly, she comments that she will have to have Valendris and his pretty rangers help her with the cargo so she can get out of here, and return once they've reclaimed the anchorage. Secondly, she comments that she had not abandoned her ship and the anchorage when the Rangers first told her to, suggesting that she was both willing and able to defy their apparent suggestions. Let's take a second here to discuss the captain and the maritime traditions of the Sindori. The anchorage, as one of those territorial snapshots we get here in Eversong, suggests that ships and the sea are important to the Sindori, as do more little things like the name of their language, Thalassian. The captain here seemingly had the authority to reject the direct orders, or evidently suggestions, of the rangers under Valendris's command. It is likely that the captain is either a higher rank on the meritocracy, or that sea captains have a special rank in Sindori society and the meritocracy. The captain doesn't seem to be a member of the Magisters nor a ranger or military rank. Probably sea captains are a separate fourth pillar of the meritocracy. Given recent events, it also seems likely that this branch is maybe a little bit cut off from the homeland. I wonder if this more rogue trader-like pillar often draws in those who are dispossessed, or otherwise ill-fitting into Sindori society. Out on the ocean, they can be a little more independent, away from the meritocracy. On our way back to Fairbreeze, we make sure to collect the remaining Springpaw lynx pelts, and report to Degolian about the situation at the anchorage. Evidently, we've also moved far enough up the meritocracy, proven ourselves enough, that he invites us to visit the Farstrider retreat that we have heard of in eastern Eversong, and check in on the fight against the Amani trolls. Stopping by to speak with Velen Brightoak, he thanks and pays us for the lynx pelts. He should be able to keep the frontline rangers equipped for a while longer with these. Alright, while we recuperate here in Fairbreeze before our next operation, let's discuss some of what we have learned and get some more analysis done. First, we have now seen a direct noble of Silvermoon, and one completely in denial of the apocalyptic situation they are in. We've discussed that mentality a bit, but it is definitely one we would expect to find among a more traditionalist faction. And that is what I would hypothesize is probably going on here. There are likely distinct factions amidst Silvermoon's political climate that remains. So far, I think we have found evidence for 3 distinct political factions. Firstly, the Here and Now, immediate problems faction we have discussed before. This faction is focused on solving all of the immediate problems the elves faced, scourged from the Ghostlands, wretched in the ruins. I suspect this faction is most common and popular with the Rangers and the Silvermoon military like the Guardians. Secondly, the long-term or future problems faction. This faction is more concerned with solving the long-term problem that the elves face, namely the loss of the Sunwell and their subsequent decline into mana thirst. This faction probably does work a fair amount with the immediate faction, but cares more about high-level problems, like finding a new source of magic. We've heard some hints now about the Outland, and I think this faction is most represented by Prince Kel'Thas and his supporters, for now. We need to discuss the timeline a little bit here. Eversong Woods is complex in this regard, and we need a little bit of extra outside context for this one. Outside of this zone, Kel'Thas Sunstrider became a villain, working with Illidan Stormrage and Outland, trying to find a new source of magic for his people. He took many of his followers with him to the Netherstorm, a place rich with magic, thus most of this specific faction would have gone with him. Exactly how he became a villain is complex, but we're not going to get into that right now. For our purposes, the important thing to know is that he essentially failed. But at the point in time that Eversong takes place, he hasn't yet. There is still a lot of hope that he will succeed, he will save his people. But it also explains why most of whom we've been working with seem to fall into the here and now problem solvers. Everyone else went with the artist formerly known as Prince. Kel'Thas, that is. And that brings us to the third political faction, the Traditionalist. These are most of the people who just want things to go back to how they were, to stay in the pomp and ceremony of the past, and don't want to leave their homeland. I don't think every member of this faction is in denial the same way Lord Southoril is, but the members of this faction don't help as much as they could, and certainly not as much as the other factions probably think they should. Most likely they spend a lot of their time on old feuds, old politics, reminiscing about better times, or just straight up pretending the world didn't end. But no more reminiscing for us. We need to head back west again and meet up with Lariana Riverwind at one of the wardstones near the Scorched Grove. Hopefully, we can learn some more about these magical runestones, as well as the creeping threat of the undead blight. We find Lariana at a very well-stocked building near the grove. She has a lot of supplies, weapons, and even extra barricades here for it just to be her in there. I wonder if other guards or rangers were posted here recently that got pulled to other threats. She herself does tell us she's glad we've come, and she does need our help. These are difficult times, and it was a hard decision to burn the woods bordering the Ghostlands to prevent the scourge from expanding. Apparently, the local treants, many of whom she describes as having been her friends for years, are trying to regrow the grove and are not listening to her arguments to stop. She tells us it is a painful thing to ask, but she needs us to stop them by the only means remaining: force. We have seen similar treants before in the Tenders, but those were magically controlled. I wonder if these ones were different, friends rather than minions. Perhaps some of the Tenders were more controlled in some areas, but left more free in others, different levels of control for different areas of Eversong. There might have been some internal differences in their society for handling these magical allies or magical servants. We've also seen at this point a fair amount of control of nature, from the flora to the fauna and natural constructs like the treants. What we have not yet encountered, though, is anybody using nature magic. Nobody labeled as a green mage or a druid. I wonder if they all died out or were lost to time. Around the Scorched Grove, we can see the burned trees alongside a few showing signs of the creeping blight of the undead already coming up. It does look like that blight will spread further if we don't take action. We begin picking off the treants, named as Withered Green Keepers, by the game. I wonder if the difference between a tender and a keeper is significant. Since they're withered, I would also wonder if their health is tied to the grove, or if they themselves have been corrupted by the Scourge Blight. We find and defeat a larger treant named Old Whitebark, and take a pendant with the initials LR carved into it, wondering if that's Lariana Riverwind. In the distance, we can see the large runestone we have been told is the failed wardstone. We'll keep an eye on it and investigate soon. Returning to Lariana, she does not thank us for killing the treants. Instead, she curses the times that have driven them to such desperate measures, cursing the scourge. She tells us, quote, "Learn this. Our lands must be protected, no matter what the cost. We shall prevail." Much like Hathvelian, it feels like her dedication to this comes from guilt, from despair at the actions she has had to take. She cannot fail now, not when she has had to sacrifice so many friends and her beloved grove to succeed. We've seen this mentality time and time again with the surviving Sindori. Handing her the pendant, she confirms that it was indeed hers. She gave it to Old Whitebark after he helped them rebuild her village. She loses her composure for a moment before thanking us for bringing it back to her. She does not want to keep it, though. Obviously, there's too many bad memories with it. Instead, she would like us to bring it to the old wardstone so that it can be buried with the better memories of a better time. We take the pendant over to the massive wardstone, and when we bury it, the enraged spirit of Old Whitebark pops out and assaults us, shouting, "Haven't you done enough harm? Must you also disturb my slumber?" When we defeat the enraged spirit, he asks us what good this violence serves. What's done is done, and he has failed his people. He no longer belongs to this world, to this land that has forever changed. Nothing here will ever be the same, but he implores us to leave the pendant there nonetheless. Maybe one day, long after the elves are gone, a new tree will grow amidst the burnt forest, among the husks of dead treants. Nearby, the failed wardstone looms, a massive standing stone with unfamiliar magical runes etched upon it. It does not match any of the aesthetic we have really seen from the Sindori, and it makes me wonder who truly built these. Hypothetically, it could have been the Blood Elves of long ago, before they were the Blood Elves or even the High Elves, shortly after they arrived from Kalimdor, and they were still Kaldorei. Perhaps such stones were more prevalent in their culture at that point. We know from the Shrine of Dathramar that they did cross over long ago. It has a different form of magic, far more subtle than anything we really now see from the Sindori. We've also been told, or really had it implied, that the Blood Elves can't repair or replace the stones. Their only recourse was to burn down a beloved grove to stop the blight from spreading. We pay our respects both to Old Whitebark and to the stone, and begin making our way directly east to pass another runestone, this one intact. Nearby, Rune Warden Darien flags us down before we can leave. He reiterates some of what we already know, that the runestones once powered a protective barrier across the Eversong border. We do also learn from Darien that many of the stones were destroyed during the Scourge attack, and that others were stolen. Only 3 stones remain standing, and only this one here remains fully powered. I am not sure how somebody stole any of these massive stones, but I am currently picturing some unknown group trying to do some practical archaeology to move them like the stoneheads of Rapa Nui, Easter Island. In any case, Darien wants to try and repower one of the dormant stones using a crystal empowered by this one, or to take this crystal to the stone farther to our east and attempt to instill its power into the stone, though Darien warns us this may draw the ire of the Scourge. We head east and need to cross the Dead Scar to make it to that standing stone. We take this opportunity to cut a swath through the undead and take some pressure off of Saren and her rangers up at Fairbreeze. These Scourge appear to be mostly wraiths and ghouls, different forms than we encountered farther up by Silvermoon. We need to sneak past several hostile greenkeepers to approach Runestone Shandor. That name certainly doesn't sound very Thalashian to me. We can see over the river into the Ghostlands to our south, and can even spot an abandoned, overgrown, probably haunted elven village. It really sets the stakes to have it so close. Using the crystal on the runestone does seem to work, at least a bit, and we have to hold off numerous wraiths to protect it. Once they stop coming for us and the crystal, we can return to Darien to report our success. He tells us he's glad that it worked and almost seemed a little bit surprised. He hopes the defenses here can hold off some of the Scourge for a while longer. Evidently, this is not a permanent solution, but we've at least slightly slowed their assaults. Returning up the road, we can spot the Eastern Sanctum in the distance and quickly scoot across the dangerous Dead Scar to speak with apprentice Merveda. The Magistrix back in the village wanted us to check on her and her experiments. Merveda seems glad that her old mentor wanted to make sure she was okay, but she does say that it's a shame that she lost faith in her research long ago. Evidently, they had a bit of a falling out about it. Merveda will not return to Fairbreeze with us, but wants us to help her with her research into the fallen Sanctum. It is heavily damaged. The orbiting spheres from the top have fallen, and the whole structure appears to be slowly sinking into the cursed ground, and now leaning just a little bit. The inside also appears to be smoking, which is a wonderful sign if you ask me. Merveda tells us that the soil around it is tainted, that undead are drawn to it. The leyline energy it used to draw is completely disrupted. She needs soil samples to see if she can reverse said taint. We fight through a lot of the undead drawn to the sanctums to collect those soil samples. Hopefully, nothing about them is touch transmitted. Unfortunately, when Merveda tries to analyze them, it draws the attention of the Scourge even further. We have to fight off Garsul the Relentless, a heavily armored skeleton, to protect Merveda. Her analysis and research has revealed an unfortunate truth. The taint is nearly irreversible, at least for now. She needs us to take her research notes back across the scar to the Magistrix so that she can review them and make sure. It is interesting that despite a falling out between them, this research is important enough for Merveda to trust the opinion and rank of Magistrix Landra. Returning back across the scar to Fairbreeze Village, we check in first with Ranger Saren. She confirms they have had a little bit of a breather from the undead attacks thanks to our actions in the scar. Her job is an endless one, but today we made it a little bit easier. Magistrix Landra has some very interesting things for us when we check in with her. The research notes from Merveda are actually shocking to her. If correct, the damage to the land on the dead scar is a huge problem. She will notify the Grand Magister right away. More than that though, she says more reason for our race to escape this world and find our true fate in Outland. Another mention of the Outland, and clearly Landra here is a member of the Future Problems faction. She has one last request for us. Her nephew was sent into the Ghostlands on a critical but secret task and he has not returned. She tells us, quote, "A missing messenger might not mean much to the callous magisters of Silvermoon, but he's like a son to me." Evidently, family ties are quite strong, at least with her. Strong enough to overcome some of the callousness we ourselves have seen with the Magisters and with the meritocracy in general. Landra herself does seem to be more empathetic though as well. She was also concerned for her wayward apprentice despite their falling out. She wants us to check south along the road into the Ghostlands. We've passed that way, but we didn't see anything. Once we're ready to investigate the Ghostlands proper though, we'll be sure to look for him. And that wraps up our requests here in Fairbreeze. We still have some rather inane demands from Lord Southrill that we will get to, including fireworks we pick up here from one of the tradesfolk, and we have an invitation to the Farstrider retreat to help them with Amani aggression. Before we get to those though, let's reflect on what we learned about the Ward Stones and the Dead Scar. The stones are fascinating. They seem like a relic of ancient days when the magic of the elves was subtler, a little less direct maybe. Unfortunately, it seems like they were nowhere near enough to stop the Scourge itself. This area also made the lack of distinct nature mages, green mages, druids, or whatever else you want to call them, particularly obvious. We hear about these partnerships with the Treants, but it seems like whoever once had the nature-aligned magic to directly interface with them is dead or gone. Both the Wardstones and missing natural magic suggest that Sindori culture can and will move on from magical schools or theories that fall out of favor. Clearly, the absolute dominance of arcane magic precluded most from studying older magics that were probably seen as quaint at best. I would hypothesize that some, especially in the country or on the fringes, still practiced said magic almost like folk magic, but these people would have been some of the most vulnerable when the Skeleton War duded on in. Arcane magics failed the elves as well though. The Scourge's tainted dead scar, it seems, can disrupt the very ley lines that these sanctums operate on. Merveda's research suggests a long and likely difficult road to recovery, one in which the Sindori will likely need help from some other schools of magic. For Merveda, I wonder if her falling out with Magistrix Landra had to do with their ideological differences. Clearly, Merveda wants to, or at least wanted to, try to heal the dead scar, something a faction of people dedicated to leaving this world wouldn't devote such effort to. It would make sense that Landra did not view Merveda's research as worth the enormous risk if they were just planning to leave, and would then be a clear reason why she would have lost faith in that research. It looks like we are headed far to the east to check in with the Rangers. We can keep climbing the ladder and see what aid they need over there on that side of the dead scar. It is a journey, but approaching the retreat we can get some hints as to this place's purpose. It feels halfway between a hunting lodge and a party post. Weapons and trophies decorate the rooms, while extra siege weapons are parked inside next to barrels of fruit and glasses of wine. It certainly seems like they have some wild parties here. Maybe Lord Southrill could learn a thing or two. In better times, this was probably a place for rangers or farstriders to relax and swap stories over a party before getting back at it. I do wonder if there is a hit Sindori motion picture, "Dude, where's my ballista?" Now this also looks like another staging post for reclamation and defense, at least over here on this side of Eversong. Checking in with Lieutenant Dawnrunner, she is glad that we are here to help. Apparently, the battle against the Amani trolls has taken its toll, and they need every capable fighter they can get. She has a Mufasa moment and tells us that all the Sin'dorei have left of their lands in Azeroth are what the what we see before us. Until we reach Outland, we need to defend what little land we still have at any cost. The uncivilized neighbors, in her words, are the Amani forest trolls, and they are raiding these elven lands almost daily. She tasks us with raiding them back, heading into their villages and teaching them a lesson. It certainly sounds like we are dealing with another brutal cycle of violence, potentially one that has been going on for a long time. Just around the corner, a smith named Erethel Sunforge calls us over. She discusses the long history of mutual dislike and open hostility with the Amani. It sounds like recently, however, she's been coming across pieces of Amani weaponry and been impressed by the quality. She wants us to hunt down a famed Amani smith named Spearcrafter Otembe and take his enchanted smithing hammer. Evidently, she has both a respect for the Amani, but also a brutality towards them if she wants us to go and murder the guy and run his pockets to steal his stuff. Her mention of the long history of conflict also sets the stage for us here. From what we have heard, this is an ongoing, perhaps even ancient conflict. We'll see if we can learn anything more up here that gives us a little bit more insight as to the nature of what's been happening. Up top of the retreat, standing by some mounted rifles, we speak with Magister Duskwither. It sounds like he is staying at the lodge temporarily, and requests our aid going down into his nearby school. He doesn't want to explicitly tell us why, but he had to shut it down recently, and one of his pupils, Laurel Thalis, was sent to check things out, and he is not heard back. He wants to send a more combat-capable agent like us to go find her. You know, for how often magisters lose apprentices and need us to go and check on them, there should be like a waiver form or something. I was initially a little bit confused as to why a magister was here at the Rangers retreat, but it makes sense as a safe place for him to stay while resolving whatever is going on with his school. This is the second school, third if we include Instructor Anthiel's setup, that we have come across here in Eversong. I'll be interested to compare it to the others once we're ready to head over there. For now though, we are focused on the Amani. We need to head southeast, farther up into the hills, practically into the mountains. Not long after our departure, we can find signs of a weathered, ancient architecture that is clearly not Sin'dorei. It is Amani. This immediately suggests that we are either dealing with a situation in which the Amani have erected these during the long conflict, or they were erected prior to it and this was once more solidly their territory. It begs a question about who was here first, the elves or the trolls. Given what we have heard about the arrival of the elves, and the nature of these ancient stones, I'm inclined to believe that it is the trolls that were here first and lost much of their territory to the Sin'dorei. The monolithic stone markers we see here are surrounded by piles of skulls, including some on spears, and the monolith itself has carved wooden masks planted on it. I want to take a moment here to step outside the game and discuss something rather personally important to me when it comes to depictions, especially in video games. Specifically, this is regarding the trolls and a lot of their early portrayal in World of Warcraft and some of the preceding Warcraft games. Trolls, especially in these earlier depictions, draw on a few specific stereotypes about real-world people. Specifically West African, Caribbean, and a number of transatlantic Afro-American cultures that emerged in the Western Hemisphere due to the slave trade. The in-game portrayal of trolls often defaults to savage, brutal, heartless killers with a focus on dark magic and trophy heads. It pushes a visceral, hostile depiction of the Amani as nothing more than primitive, uncivilized savages. Trophy heads in the real world were a practice of some of these cultures. In some specific cases, so was cannibalism. However, there is enormous context around these things that is missing, especially ceremonial purpose and a cultural understanding of them vastly different than the one being presented. More than that, they often get heavily sensationalized when portrayed in media like this. In Warcraft, these things have come to predominantly identify the troll cultures, coupled with a rather infamously bad faux Jamaican accent, and a nebulously defined, poor interpretation of the very complex real-world belief system that is voodoo. I personally have enormous disdain for the hyperfixation on these caricaturistic elements, and often try to look past them to what else we can find in the troll cultures. In later content, there is a more holistic, less stereotyped depiction of these traditions. When we get to these, there is a lot more we can look at beyond troll took your head, ate your body while laughing in a racist caricature of a Jamaican accent. For now though, we're gonna have to look at the Amani as presented here, and try to look behind this implanted racism to draw more complex, holistic conclusions about their society. Where it is relevant, I will try to incorporate an analysis of these practices as used by the trolls. That will primarily be in places where they have context and more than just a shallow, truly surface level hee-hee skull piles. I want to discuss this in more detail in later videos about other zones, and I am quite interested to see the updated Amani coming with Midnight that should have a more complete, less farcical caricature presentation. For now, let's get back into the game world and just try to keep these things in mind. We will do our best to look past this poorly representative area to try to interpret and analyze what we can. Looking at this monolith, it is damaged and partly overgrown. Ancient carvings on some of the faces cannot easily be read by us, and the skulls piled around its base suggest either a claiming of territory or a warning away of enemies. Given the number and size of the skulls, I would guess that these are probably from many of the undead rather than the elves. Especially given the urns also placed around the monolith, I would wonder if this is actually doing double duty as both a territorial marker and a ceremonial site. We'll see if we can find any more indication of that farther in. We've not really heard much about the Amani and their tribulations with the undead yet, but given the situation, I find it rather impossible they've at least not been pressed by them. We also encounter our first troll here. The Amani are forest trolls, large humanoids with tusks and great regenerative abilities. This first one we have encountered here is a berserker, implying a little bit about how they fight. He appears to be dual-wielding axes and wearing little to no armor. There are what appear to be decorative feathers on what pieces of gear he is wearing, trophies or a signifier of rank and accomplishment perhaps. Following the path up from the monolith, we can begin to see a different set of flora. Massive evergreen trees shadow these hills instead of the eternal silver-gold trees of the Sindori. Quickly, we can see more signs of ancient weathered troll architecture, as well as more urns and skulls. We also encounter our second type of Amani combatant, the Shadow Priest. Clearly these are a caster, but they are equally proficient with their long staves as well. We fight through several before sighting Spearcrafter Otembe near the largest section of the ruins. Those ruins are very interesting, and my archaeologist senses are a-tingling. We derail for a moment to go look at them, of course. We see massive stone block construction, probably easier to move and work for someone the size of trolls with their strength. We see what looks like jade stone mosaics and murals depicting mostly figures in pose rather than something like a landscape or any specific scene. These are absolutely trolls in these murals. We can easily identify their tusks in the artwork. The upper mural is a mirrored image showing trolls in what looks to be a supplicant position towards a brazier spewing smoke or flame. It suggests a religious or ceremonious scene given the ornate design and material cost. The stonework is exquisite and durable. These buildings must be either quite old to be this rundown, or were attacked and ruined directly sometime in the past. Nearby, we can see more recent examples of Amani architecture. Well-built wooden houses utilizing the local materials. The only piece of these I'm not sure to the origin of are those massive tusks. I'd be a little bit terrified to meet whatever those came from. The rest of these buildings are very clearly local. Pine wood for the sides and supporting beams, pine branches and needles for the roofs. Around them are strung feathers and pine cones as decoration. In the first structure, we find a number of drums, some wicker crates, and larger versions of masks similar to those we saw on the monolith. Around them are piled a lot more skulls as well. All of these taken together suggest that this first structure is probably a gathering space, perhaps for religious or communal purposes. We come rushing out of the structure to ambush Spearcrafter Otembe. He puts up a good fight, but ultimately we pry his hammer from his cold dead hands. we spy something odd behind where he was camped out, a wicker cage with another troll in it. This troll doesn't look like an Amani, he is too high res. Indeed, upon speaking with him, he claims that he is a Darkspear troll named Venjashi. Further, he tells us that the Amani are their mortal enemies. He implores us to take out the leader of this group named Zul'Marash, an evil troll that poisoned him and left him here to die. We take the dying troll's request and we are off to hunt down this Zul'Marash. From what Venjashi told us, we'll find him near the far shore of the lake. Before we head over there, we're going to check out a few more of these Amani buildings. Wait, all of these buildings appear to have the same 4 assets in them. Voodoo masks, drums, urns, and skulls. Hey, this one has butcher's tools. Oh no. Ah shit. We also encounter our 3rd type of Amani warrior, the axe thrower. This completes the trifecta of their fighters up here and lets us draw a few conclusions about their fighting style. They wear little to no armor, relying upon speed, agility, and their regeneration. This supports a hit-and-run style of combat, especially using guerrilla tactics, where they have time for their wounds to heal up before they strike again. Their shadow priests seem to specialize in malignancies and curses that wither their foes away over time, rather than large, singularly powerful spells. I would imagine their task is to harass and weaken their foes before the berserkers and axe throwers come in to finish them off. While we're discussing the Amani tactics, perhaps we should also then think about the Sin'dorei way of fighting war. We've seen 3 primary combatants from them as well: mages, rangers, and guardians. The Rangers seem to be the versatile go-to force for anything that's not a permanent hold point, with Guardians often defending more critical locations with lots of other elves at them. I would wonder if this is actually a manpower issue. There's not enough elves for the more heavily armored Guardians to be stationed everywhere. The more mobile and versatile Rangers have to fill in the gap, but this puts them in a lot more frontline combat, especially against the Scourge. Mages are probably the biggest advantage of the Blood Elves, but it also seems like they are reluctant to deploy them right now. They seem to be relying wholly upon the Guardians and Rangers to hold the line. I wonder if there's not enough mages left, or if those who remain are nervous to use what magic and mana they still have for endless tasks like fighting off the Scourge. The few mages we do see out and about are often apprentices or arcanists, lower ranks on the meritocracy. This rather grimly suggests that the higher-ranked, more powerful magisters either need to be using their magic elsewhere, or won't risk themselves and their power on what might, relatively speaking, be considered menial combat tasks. Back to hunting for Zul'Marash though. We cross the lake using some very convenient shallows and can see him holed up in a much larger structure of similar construction to the other Amani buildings. We cut through his forces over here with ease and claim his head. On his body, we find plans with locations marked for both Fairbreeze Village and the Farstrider Retreat. These look like markers of increased aggression, so we make sure to take them with us so that we can show them to Lieutenant Dawnrunner. Scooting back across the lake, we show a dying Venjashi the head of Zul'Marash and all 5 of its polygons. He can die in peace. Before he departs, he hands us a bow he had buried in the sand and tells us that we have avenged both his family and his village. That is a little bit surprising given that we have seen no evidence of any other trolls in the area. It sounds like there might be some complicated geopolitics going on here. But let's take a moment to further discuss the Amani and what we do, or don't, see here. For one, there seem to be no non-combatants amongst the Amani. Everyone here is a fighter. That might be expected if this was a raiding party or a temporary setup. However, I do not believe that this is the case. These buildings are too permanent, especially the one Zul'Marash was in, coupled with the clearly very different landscape and flora up here in the hills and mountains. They're also directly linked to the Ghostlands and Zul-Aman, without any evidence of wardstones or elven fortifications or structures up here. This is clearly Amani territory, and this looks to be a permanent village. Even the Amani military doctrine we have seen supports this being a permanent settlement. Their strategy clearly relies around swift movement and hit-and-run raiding attacks. This village cannot easily be moved though. It is not a temporary camp to quickly pack up and leave. This is a home. But every building we check is filled with skulls and trophies. None of the buildings seem like residences or housing of any sort, just more ritual and military purposes. Nothing but bones. There are no food supplies, no hunting cabins, not even a smithy for the renowned spearcrafter. Only brutal savages living in huts of horror in the mountains, surrounded by skulls and dark magic. Realistically, if they were taking trophy heads or skulls, we would expect individuals to keep the important ones with them as a mark of pride or status, or exalt them as part of their home and spirituality, not scatter them about seemingly haphazardly. Trophies like that are valuable and important, not something you have piled en masse around every conceivable corner. They need food supplies, smithies for their many weapons, people who are non-combatants or at least less combatants. We see no hunters, no fishers, no lumberjacks or craftsmen making their structures. We see no young, no old. We don't even see any women. Every Amani looks the exact same. Now, obviously there is some gamification going on here. To do some of that deeper analysis though, we have to look pretty hard and get a little bit creative. Firstly, we know that the Amani have a tradition of raiding, but we don't know if they took much materially. Indeed, we see very little if anything up here that would suggest it was stolen from the elves. Instead, I would hypothesize that the goal of that rating is experience and status. More survived battles, more experience, perhaps even better trophy skulls. I don't think most of these skulls up here though are elven. Not only are there not enough elves for that scale of a raid to be called anything other than a full-on invasion, but the skulls themselves don't really support that. Most likely, these are skulls from the Scourge, and they have lower value, explaining why they're haphazardly piled around. There may be old traditions here around needing your first kill in order to become an adult, or trophy heads being important for your social status, and these are being a little bit thrown off due to the prevalence of ghouls and skeletons playing flutes on your front door. In this inflated economy of trophy skulls, experience fighting against the elves, especially the more experienced ones like rangers or farstriders, matters much more, as would those trophy skulls. When everyone in society can yoink the skull off of a skeleton, the ability to go toe-to-toe with a farstrider matters a lot more. We can even see a little bit of this in-game. Zul'Marash doesn't have any more skulls piled up around him than any other building. These skulls seem superfluous, no longer indicative of value or skill. Let's also discuss the ancient ruins versus the modern Amani. I suspect this was set up just to have the old tired myth of the collapsed primitives living in the ruins of their once great empire, but we can find a lot more nuance than that. Realistically, enormous masonry structures are expensive to build and maintain. If you have lost most of your territory and resources, a large chunk of your population, and are now under constant threat by a new neighbor, building large ornate stone structures is far from the best use of your resources. Further, if the people you are fighting are adept arcane mages, you probably don't want large singular stone structures. Smaller, more spread out, and much more easily camouflaged buildings would serve you a lot better. Last, but certainly not least, an empire is not buildings, it's people. And after such a devastating loss of most of your homeland, cultural shifts towards smaller, more community-oriented settlements and away from large centralized cities would make sense. We also have a lot of parallels for this in the real world. We'll keep discussing this as we go through this series, especially when we eventually get to Zul'Gurub, Zuldrak, and Zuldazar. Please let me know down below if this is a topic you were interested in. As an archaeologist that was mostly taught through Meso and South American archaeology, these are topics that are very important to me personally. We make our way out of the upper hills and back to the Farstrider retreat. Speaking with Lieutenant Dawnrunner, she thanks us for our service against the Amani. But more than that, she says that with more people like us, they will restore the glory of their lands in no time. We need to pass the warning to Fairbreeze Village that they may also be targeted by the Amani. Though we've just delivered a brutal reprisal upon them and killed one of their leaders, it's always best to be careful. Nearby, we hand Spearcrafter Otembe's enchanted hammer to Erithel, and she offers us the pick of her unfinished projects now that she can get through them with the magical artifact. That's a rather brutal utilitarianism, killing the Amani smith just so that she can finish more of her own projects with his hammer. We take out our pick and get ready to head back north along the road to assist Magister Duskwither with his school problems. We're looking for his apprentice, Laurelthalis, who we find a small distance from the academy itself. Speaking with her, much like Merveda, she seems surprised that the Magister expressed any concern for her well-being, since evidently he never has before, but she has a huge favor to ask of us while we're here. She was sent over here to power down the 3 magical sources at the spire, and looking up, we can see what the hell she's talking about. The school appears to be a massive floating Sindori structure, so, of course, we know exactly how important it must be. Laurelthalis tells us she was not strong enough to get past the strange magical beings pouring from it. It sounds like more of the arcane wraiths we've fought several times around malfunctioning or damaged Sindori magical implements. We need to shut down the 3 power sources of the spire to stop them from emerging, but she also wants us to keep an eye out for the groundskeeper, Willithan, who has been missing and may not have gotten the evacuation order. We need to access the spire via teleporter, and the ether fiends around it are none too happy about that. We fight through them and gain access to the school proper. Up on the spire, we can see that these magical power sources look like they're more burning crystals that we've seen before. I wonder if the same malaise that has befallen Sunstrider Isle and the Falthrian Academy there is responsible for whatever has happened here. Trying to shut down the crystals, we're attacked by several former students that have turned wretched. That is really not a good sign. We have to put them down, but it is concerning that they're wretched at all. It seems like whatever calamity happened here can cause that transformation to happen quite quickly. On the second level, next to one of the larger burning crystals, we find Magister Duskwither's journal. It sounds like he was trying to filter out some sort of corrupted magical energies. These may be what brought about the spire's downfall. It does sound like he was investigating the same or similar corruption to what we witnessed on Sunstrider. We find a convenient second orb of translocation on the uppermost level that can send us back down to the bottom once we've powered everything else down. It almost seems a little like a fire escape. You have to have multiple means of egress in a floating structure. We head down into the grounds below to look for Willithan, and find him near a terrace very similar to those we saw on Sunstrider Isle, as well as the small lecturing area Instructor Altheon had in central Eversong. It makes me think these may well have been 2 competing academies, almost like a Sindori, Harvard, and Yale. The layouts and construction of each are very similar, with just enough differences to be distinct. Ah, I went to Falthrian, you knave, you went to Duskwither. In any case, groundskeeper Willithan seems to take his job very seriously. Amidst all of the chaos happening, he still is trying to keep the gardens and grounds maintained, and he needs our help to do it. We need to clear out even more of the Ether Fiends and Renegade Mana Serpents so that he can do his job. I don't know what kind of crazy school pride this man has here, gardening in the middle of this, but I guess we can help him out. Once we've cleared a swath of the magical creatures, Willithan thanks and actually pays us what he can. He wants to get back to work quickly before the Magister returns. This man is ridiculously devoted. I wonder if his job as the groundskeeper here is some sort of step on a special meritocracy, or where he just ended up on it. He certainly takes this post just as seriously as people like Captain Eldon back at Falconwing take their military responsibilities. We return back up the path to Laurelthalis and let her know both that we found and helped out Willithan, and that we have powered down the spire. The news about her fellow students becoming wretched and needing to be put down seems to really upset and shock her, and she stays put here until she can recover their remains. Thus, it is up to us to report back to Magister Duskwither on all that transpired. We head back up to the retreat and fill him in, and hand him back his journal. He tells us it was too late and all his fault. His research into purifying alternative magical sources got out of hand, and he wishes he had acted sooner. He further elaborates that he wishes his apprentices had listened to him sooner and evacuated the spire. It does sound like he at least tried, even if he was too late. He tells us, quote, "It is some small consolation that they will not linger in that state where a blood elf is better off dead." Well, damn. While we are processing that statement, he opts to burn his research so that no one can repeat his mistakes. I'm not really sure how much that will help, since we know plenty of other magisters and arcanists are attempting to also find and safely utilize other magical sources. It seems to me like it might be more helpful to keep his research, if nothing else as a what not to do, but hey, guilt is a powerful thing, and so far, every Sindori seems burdened by it. For now, we reflect on our journey through Eversong as we begin the long trek back to Fairbreeze Village to warn them about the Amani. It has been a very revealing, if complex, analysis so far. First, though, a quick discussion of what we did not see. In this case, due to some of the important location snapshot style of the zone, these can be a little bit difficult to interpret. We saw no major agriculture, but we can posit some of what the Sindori food sources should look like. From their supplies, we know that fruits and grains are common. We would expect to find orchards probably enchanted and bountiful. Fields of grain equally enchanted would probably make up the rest. I would also expect fishing and hunting to feature, if not necessarily as staple foods, then as luxuries or recreation. Fishing would probably be more common given the maritime themes we have seen, while hunting is probably as much a sport as it is a food source. We also saw few, if any, signs of true religion represented in the zone, beyond some reverence for the lost Sunwell. We know there is a religion, especially given some of the voice lines referencing Belore, but very little referenced in-game physically. Hypothetically, I would posit that religion, outside of that vague reverence for the Sunwell, has lost much of its meaning even before the invasion. Following the catastrophe, it faded away even further rather than being a unifying force, as it could have been. We also did not see a lot of truly centralized control. Most groups operate under the purview of the Regency and Council, but with extremely broad flexibility and independence. They only rarely report back. This may both be a relic of a time when the king was as much a ceremonial position as well as political, as well as a response to the ever-shifting realities on the ground, not really supporting tight centralized control right now. And lastly, with the Amani, we did not really see a vibrant, fleshed-out culture. Instead, we saw shells of a caricature, but hopefully we can do some more analysis when we see some more of the trolls, and eventually some more of the Amani in the Ghostlands. At the very least, with midnight on the horizon, we might see some more of them as well. But let's get to what we did see. From our humble start as a lowly agent on Sunstrider Isle, to now an esteemed member of the Farstriders, if our recent actions are any indication, our little ranger here has done and seen a lot. The Sindori, or Blood Elves, are a complicated bunch. Their culture has gone through some recent massive shocks and upheaval that have put much of their society into flux. The overwhelmingly most common theme we have seen is resilience, doing whatever it takes to survive and succeed. On Sunstrider Isle, we learned of the loss of control that afflicts so much of their society now. This takes many forms, from their magical constructs and creatures to directly losing control of their territory. Worst of all, though, it can mean losing control of themselves and becoming wretched. These lost Blood Elves are hated, reviled by their kin, and often hunted down. They are reduced to scavengers, looting, stealing, and killing for that next drop of mana. The Sindori have no cure available beyond a swift end, and no sympathy or empathy left for their former kin. Indeed, I wonder if some of their hatred is not just for what the wretched have become, but that by seeing it, they are directly reminded of the fate that could all too easily await them as well. We see a society built upon several pillars. The one we engaged the most directly with was the meritocracy, climbing the ladder of accomplishment and merit through our deeds and successes. We were often an agent for higher-placed individuals, carrying out their will to recover and reclaim as much of Eversong as could be saved. Magic is clearly the pinnacle of that meritocracy, if the aesthetic and structures are anything to go by. That is, at least it was. Magisters still seem to be influential political figures, but they seem reticent or incapable of directly engaging problems. It might be that they are at greater risk of becoming wretched. Physicality, be it rangers or guardians, has become the required method of response to force. In that, we see the rangers becoming stretched thin, overburdened with tasks, and unable to reinforce or recover. There are nowhere near enough of them to respond to all of the threats they face. We see their guilt at their perceived failures as well. Projections of their inability to stop the scourge, stop the fall of their city, stop the loss of their most important cultural and magical artifact. A projection of that guilt manifests as extreme hostility to the Alliance, to the Murlocs, the Amani, and most of all to the Scourge. But whoever is opposed to them is now the threat, and they must be stopped at any cost. In the process of reclaiming Eversong, we ourselves took on much of the dirty work. Assassination, annihilation, acquisition. We were the hand, the tool that carried these tasks out as an agent of the meritocracy. But this meritocracy is not the only pillar we encountered. We saw nobles like Lord Southrill who are unable to cope with the catastrophic loss that they have endured. Instead, many of these folks have retreated inwards and back to a better time, a time of parties and plenty. Many are in denial of the threats they still face, even if some few of them can confront what they have lost. This traditionalist faction struggles to move forward, because it cannot reconcile with what was and is now gone. The Rangers, and many of their peers, are so spread out and engaged on so many fronts that they have to focus on the problems of the here and now, the immediate threats that need to be handled. They can spare no time for old traditions, nor can they think overlong on a future solution. That future solution falls to the third faction, the planners and the long-term solution people. They are researchers, magisters, and others who seek a solution to the biggest problem they have, the loss of the Sunwell and subsequent mana thirst. Many of these probably went with Prince Kel'Thas Sunstrider to Outland and the Netherstorm, where they hope a land awash with magic may be their salvation. Others have stayed behind, hopeful that the prince will succeed, but needing to train up the next generation of agents and problem solvers. Magistrix Arona was one such, and began our journey. She set us on the path to becoming such a problem solver. We also met Magistrix Landra, who stayed behind to help her apprentice wrap up her research into the dead Scar. And that scar runs through the very heart of Sin'dorei society. It physically divides the land in two, filled with the bones of the fallen and their unquiet revenants. It is the source of so much of the threat that the Rangers must respond to. With their arcane sanctums overloaded and failing, a seemingly incurable scar ripped across their land and across their culture, their academies and places of learning overrun with arcane wraiths, they endure. For the blood of the fallen is their burden to bear. Once high elves, now blood elves, they have taken on the very moniker of that which matters most to them. They will stand together against their annihilation, knowing that the survival of their race is the only end that matters, and to reach that end, any means is justified. And that is all for today, folks. Our next video will be a continuation of this investigation by reaching through the gates of Silvermoon to see what we can find, as well as poking around to see what other odds and ends of Eversong might stand out. And of course, with midnight on the horizon, we will be doing another video on Eversong soon, and see how much it has changed. Thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed this content, please consider liking and subscribing. I have been your host, Mal, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Let Elf Druids win.